Okay, folks, I think we're going to get started. It's a little after 6:30. So welcome to the 2023 Forest Lake Association Annual Meeting. My name is Jerry Grutner, and I'm the president of the association. A couple of housekeeping items for you before we get started. First of all, the bathrooms. Everybody needs bathrooms. You got to go back out to where the cafeteria is and go to the left, go all the way down there. The restrooms are down that way. If you could silence your cell phones, that would be appreciated. Forest Lake Public Television is live streaming this, and there also will be a YouTube video that if you want to watch it again or send it to a friend or neighbor, whatever, you'll be able to do that also. Our intention is to wrap up by 8 o'clock, and our last part of our agenda will have questions and answers like we do every year, which is always fun and exciting and kind of a good way to end the meeting. And then the last thing, and I don't think it's a problem, but the school doesn't allow any food or drink into the auditorium, so we'd appreciate that. So the agenda tonight is pretty simple. I'll be speaking for a little bit. Steve McComish with Blue Water Science will be speaking about AIS. Mike Kenny with the Watershed District will be talking about the water quality project updates and what's going on with that. We are hoping that Rob Rabasco with the DNR, I think he's en route. We're hoping he's en route. He's not here yet. He's driving down from Brainerd, so he will be our third speaker talking about loons and loon populations and loons in Minnesota and so forth, and then we'll have our Q&A session there at the end of it. And now we have a technical problem. There we go. We have 12 board members that represent the Lake Association. I'm not going to go through them all with you, but they work tirelessly during the 12 months of the year to help support and do the right things for the lake and represent you as our membership. Most of us all have got our blue shirts on, so if you see someone with a blue shirt on, stop, introduce yourself, and they would appreciate that. So, membership. There's about 975 plus or minus residents who have access to Forest Lake or live on the lake. Of that, in 2022, 519 individual and lake sponsor members paid. So we had about 52% of the population on Forest Lake as members, which is, you know, an exciting opportunity. Our goal in 2023 is to increase our membership by 10%. That's a stretch goal. We're going to work hard on it, but we think we can increase our membership by 10%. We have 644 members in our database, which means that there was, at one point in time, all 644 people had paid membership, and as you can see, there's a gap between the 644 and the 519. So we're still trying to reach out to those people and get them to renew their membership here to be part of the association. Last year in 2022, 34 new homeowners moved on to Forest Lake. We also reach out to those 34, ask them to join the association, and we usually have a pretty good turnout of new members from the new homeowners. So in 2022, the Lake Association spent $40,445, and we expect 2023 to be about the same, plus or minus. That's up from what it was pre-COVID, but like everything else, things have gone up in price. You know, I'm not going to go through all of this here, but you can see we spend our monies on a great deal of number of things, including the last item, which is our operating costs, which is our accounting, software, printing, insurance, all that other stuff. So, you know, we're well funded as an organization. You know, it's a lot of money for a nonprofit to pay out on an annual basis, but we're lucky and we appreciate all of your support in being able to do that. So the native vegetation harvester, this is always a hot topic. We are still in a partnership with the city of Forest Lake on this. Again, this harvester can only operate in DNR permitted areas, And for 2023, that'll be about 165 acres. And we won't be cutting in all of that acreage. It's more than we can actually cut in. In 2022, we removed 157 loads of vegetation, or about 1,884 cubic yards, which is really 188 truckloads. That's a big number. What is the direction of AIS in regards to the Lake Association? So in 2023, the Lake Association will again be responsible for treating Eurasian water milfoil. The change this year is that the watershed district, and we really appreciate this, has decided that they will be responsible for and paying for treatment of the heavy growth areas. It's hard to say how much that is of the total, but they will be paying for the heavy growth areas, and the Lake Association will be paying for the not so heavy growth areas. So this will be a partnership in 2023, and we appreciate the district helping fund the treatment for Eurasian milfoil. We expect to spend between $25,000 and $30,000 in 2023 on Eurasian milfoil treatment. Some of you have heard me talk about this in years past. One of my concerns has always been the introduction of starry stonewort. That is it is an AIS species that is spreading around many lakes north of us and west of us. What's most concerning is that in 2022, 38 boats entered Forest Lake from starry stonewort infested lakes. In other words, they came from that lake that was infested to Forest Lake. Now that's a lot of boats, and that's only the boats that our inspectors were able to inspect, because we don't have full-time inspection at these launches. So more than likely there was more than 38 boats that came into Forest Lake that came from waters that had starry stonewort. It only takes one boat to potentially bring in another AIS species. The Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District is responsible for all other AIS, such as flowering rush, curly pondweed, zebra mussels. Lake Association doesn't do anything with that, and that's the responsibility of the Watershed District. So what is the health of Forest Lake? Mike will talk about this a little bit more later on, but Lake 1, 2, and 3 are rated differently, but we're rated from a B+ to a C-, so you know, we're kind of middle of the road as far as the rating of the quality of the lake. We have several species of AIS, which we all know, but we don't have it all yet. Hopefully we can keep it out. This next statistic is kind of mind-boggling to me, is that in 2022, 7,056 boats, repeat that, 7,056 boats were inspected coming in and out of Forest Lake over, pick a time frame, 5 months. We have a tremendous amount of external boating that comes into Forest Lake, as we all see when we're out on the lake ourselves. So it's a number that seems to creep up a little bit each year, and it's something we have to watch. Fisheries are good. We all love fishing, and Forest Lake is stocked, as we know, and so fishing is always good. Mike will talk further about water clarity. Water clarity is increasing significantly, and the Watershed District is going to talk about how we're going to do some more improvement in water clarity. And then there's continued pressure from growth in the area. You know, there's still a few homes being built on the lake. In addition to that, there is shoreline restoration, shorelines that are being modified and so forth, that's causing potentially some significant input and impact to the water quality. So again, we are a metro urban lake, unfortunately, but so there's pressure just from a growth standpoint. So what's the importance of the Lake Association? So we bring value to lakeshore homeowners. We're the largest voice for Forest Lake. We work and communicate directly with the City of Forest Lake and the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District. And not only are we involved in AIS and weed harvester, but most of the buoys that are out between the channels are buoys that the Lake Association has purchased over the years. And we don't install them or take them out. The sheriff does that, but we're buying those buoys. And we're also doing, as you know, we've done additional dock sections at Lakeside Park for the public dock, and I'm going to talk about a pretty exciting thing that's happening with the dock, public dock down at Lakeside here this year, a little bit later in my talk here. So we do other things besides AIS and other harvesters and stuff like that. So accomplishments for the Lake Association in 2022 and 2023. So I mentioned this last year at this meeting, but we did execute an agreement between the City of Forest Lake and the Watershed District and the Lake Association. The three partners have agreed in writing that we will spend up to $150,000 on water quality and water quality improvement projects on Forest Lake. And that's a big number. In 2022, we didn't spend the $150,000. The agreement is that the city pays for whatever we spend 42.5%, the Watershed District pays for 42.5%, and the Lake Association pays for 22.5%. So we are in the process of renewing that agreement for 2023, and we will be, could potentially spend up to $150,000 again on Forest Lake. In 2023, we partnered with the city in the expansion of the public dock down at Lakeside Park. And this is pretty exciting. For those of us that have wanted to go to eat dinner downtown or go downtown for some other reason, you drive down there and there's no place to park your boat. What do you do, right? So this is actually your boat club. Here's the shore, here's the beach. And we are expanding the dock here with slips. It'll be similar to what's at your boat club, where we will bring in dual pontoons or boats into these slips, and we'll be able to park between 24 and 27 boats at this dock, beginning by Memorial Weekend, hopefully, when we hope the dock will be finally installed. The intent of this is that if you want to go downtown by boat, you shouldn't have to worry about, am I going to find a place to park or not? So this is a huge improvement for everybody who lives on the lake. The Lake Association has contributed $15,000 to this enhanced dock, and the City of Forest Lake is spending somewhere between $35,000 and $40,000 for this dock. So it's a major expenditure, but it's going to be well worth it, and we really hope it gets used a lot here this year and going forward. So what can you do? Promote the Lake Association through your yard signs and talking with the neighbors. Yard signs for, this has been a 2 or 3 year program that we've had, and many of you have got the yard signs out in your yard. It's been a great opportunity for us to expand our membership and to promote the Lake Association. So I should tell you right now too, when you leave, there's going to be free signs out there. If your signs are bad or broken, or you just want a new one, or want to put 2 out in your yard, that's fine too. Stop by and pick up a free sign on your way out. Consider joining the Lake Ambassadors. This is a program we've had for a couple of years. It's out on our website, and I would encourage you to consider looking at that and joining it. Be observant. You are the people, as the members who are out on the lake, see things on the lake. If there's something that doesn't look right on the lake, or there's something going on with fisheries, or this week we had someone emailing us about some dead turtles, reach out to the Lake Association or the Watershed District regarding that. I mean, that is what we hope you would do. We send out between 20 and 25 emails on an annual basis regarding important things on the lake, things going on with the lake and stuff like that. Please read those. We get about 50 to 60% of the emails we send out are read. In other words, the open rate is only 50 or 60%. So 50% of the people don't even look at the emails we send out. So I hope you would consider doing that. If you're here and you're not a member of the Lake Association, please consider joining. You can do that by signing up when you come in, or when you leave, you can sign up. You can do it on our website, and we'll be sending invoices out again here in the next month or so. You can do it electronically that way too. And the last but not least is let the City of Forest Lake know how important our lake is, okay? The City of Forest Lake is named after the lake. So, the lake is the cornerstone of this community, so it's extremely important. As someone said, it's the largest park in Forest Lake. I want to highlight the fact that we also have businesses. We call them our lake sponsors. And these are local businesses and some near local businesses that want to support the lake. And we have 50 of those businesses right now. I think actually the number might be 51 today, of sponsors. And, you know, patronize these folks if you would, because they're trying to, you know, do things good for the lake and provide us some funding for the lake, and they're local businesses. So I would encourage you to look at these. This listing gets put as a final attachment on every email we send out. Plus, we highlight these businesses on our Facebook page, which is a very robust Facebook page, by the way, too. If you haven't looked at it, please look at it on a weekly basis also. So in summary, the Lake Association is only as good as our members. You know, if you have a robust membership, you're going to have a robust organization. And we have a robust membership, so we have a great organization. Forest Lake remains, as far as I'm concerned, the premier lake in the metro area. If not in the metro area, at least in the East Metro area, it is the premier lake. I'd ask you to pay your dues for 2023 if you have not done that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, yard signs. They're free for your taking. Pick them up as you leave. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve McComish, who will talk about AIS.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Steve McComas. Thank you, Jerry, for giving a good overview of some of the lake conditions and situations. I was going to talk about, in some detail, about the aquatic invasive species, their kind of existing presence, and also some treatment things that we have done over the last few years. So let's just get started. We're going to go with the first topic is going to be curly-leaf pondweed. First of all, in terms of AIS species, here's kind of a summary on this side. Curly-leaf pondweed, milfoil, flowering rush, and zebra mussels. On the other side are native plants, native fish. Fish aren't too much of a problem. Sometimes our native plants can grow fairly abundantly based on the good conditions, good growing conditions. Well, here's curly-leaf pondweed. That's an aquatic invasive species. It grows early in the year. It can present navigational, recreational problems, some ecological problems, and then when it dies back, it has potential impact to have an adverse impact on water quality as well. Over the years, we've been treating it. In 2023, a week or so ago, here was the distribution and abundance of curly-leaf pondweed on May 9th. You can see that it's pretty well distributed through all three lakes, First Lake, Second, and Third. This year, fair amount of curly-leaf in First Lake and in Third Lake. We also are carefully looking at the channels to make sure that the navigation ways are kept clear. So we have looked at a couple treatment areas, especially between First and Second Lake. We're looking at a total of about 61 acres to treat this year. And that is down a little bit compared to some previous years. We've been kind of tracking it since 2009 with herbicide applications. You can see we've gone from a low of 17 acres in 2018 to a high of, it was 120 acres in 2021, 168 acres in 2011. So it really does vary from year to year, based primarily on snowfall, ice out, sunlight, turbidity conditions in the lake. So this year we're looking at 62, and that 62 acres to treat, and that's down a number, it's almost half of what it has been in the last couple of years. Excuse me. Well, speaking of treatments over the years, what I did here is took the last 10 years of treatment up to 2021 and put all our treatment areas on top of each other. There's not really a pattern, except that you could say it's pretty well distributed throughout the whole lake. And then some years, it's just higher in one part of the lake compared to another part of the lake. And what happens is that it's kind of hard to predict, but it has potential to grow in a number of areas. It's almost like a wild rice crop where you have boom years and then off years. It might very well use up some of the sediment micronutrients, takes a year to kind of regenerate those in the sediments, and then the curly leaf can come back next year. So if it's there this year, doesn't necessarily mean it'll be there next year. And that's why we do those surveys to track where it's going to be this year. So that's curly-leaf pondweed, and we have it kind of on the run, so to speak, but it's tough to eliminate. Curly-leaf pondweed rarely has been eliminated from any lake, so it's there, and we try to manage it as best we can. Another AIS, aquatic invasive species, is Eurasian milfoil. It first came into the lake, I believe, in 2015, 2016. It spread primarily in First Lake, and it's going a little bit into Second Lake. Last year, in June, in 2022, we only saw it in a few spots in First Lake, and we're kind of wondering what's going on. Turns out that it was just kind of slow growing, because by the next survey, which was in August, we did find it at a few more spots. Going back to June, we said, well, there's not really much there to treat, so we didn't treat. But when we came back and did another survey, we did find that it had expanded a little bit, and what's kind of the good news is milfoil is primarily in First Lake, a little bit in Second Lake, and we have not found any Eurasian milfoil in Third Lake. Now, the pattern typically is that it does spread throughout the whole lake. So it's a bit of a success story to keep it contained primarily in First Lake, dipping a little bit into Second Lake. Eventually, it probably will get into Third Lake, but not yet. So in August, we circled up some of the heavy growth areas, about 9 acres, and we had some light growth in these other areas. And the decision was made to, well, let's be a little bit aggressive and treat some of those other areas that had relatively late growth. Excuse me. So we ended up treating about 22 acres. That's fairly aggressive because we were treating heavy growth and in some of the areas light to moderate growth. But it looks like we're still keeping it contained primarily in First Lake. We only treated about 1 acre in Second Lake. So far, so good with that. And the results, so what we always do too is we go back and we check. Okay, here's where it was. We delineate it, we treat, and we go back and assess. And in this case, we had excellent control. So at the end of last year in October, we didn't find hardly any Eurasian milfoil. Plenty of northern milfoil, which is a native plant, but very little Eurasian in any parts of the lake. Here is what milfoil distribution has looked like since 2015. We've circled up and put on the map all the areas that have been treated for the last 8 years. And you can see that it's primarily in the First Lake. It varies from year to year in terms of where it shows up. But so far, this is about as far as it's gone in the Second Lake. Nothing yet in Third Lake. So we'll keep an eye on that. And if we do see it, I think we'll be fairly aggressive and try to manage it. So that's Eurasian water milfoil. Another invasive species that we kind of follow and track and manage is flowering rush. Flowering rush has been in the lake for a number of years. But in the last few years, again, we've been pretty assertive from the standpoint of treating it where we find it, and we've been typically treating it about 2 times a year. So we'll wait till July till it starts kind of growing up, and then we track it. We track every site. We number every site. And then we come back after that, and a herbicide applicator will come in and treat what he sees based on what our map shows. And then after that, we'll go back and we'll assess. Well, back up for a second. So in 2022, most of the treatment was in Second and Third Lakes. We only treated a total of about 2 acres, although there were a number of sites, probably a 50, 60, or 80 sites, very small patches, treating those before they can grow into bigger beds. So after the first treatment, we kind of evaluated the first treatment, and then in August, not only do we evaluate the first treatment, but we're looking at what new growth do we get. What happens is flowering rush kind of continues to grow and sprout over the entire summer. So if we were just to treat once in July, we'd miss the growth, the new growth, at the end of July and August. So we come in August, in this case August 9th, we found the new growth, we delineated that, and an applicator came in, treated a total of about 5 acres of flowering rush. And that's where it's been showing up. We've had a little bit of flowering rush kind of dip up into First Lake, but not nearly as heavy or as widespread as flowering rush is in Second and Third Lakes. Flowering rush, by the way, is that plant that looks kind of like a bulrush, has those pink flowers if we let it go too long. But the thing is that it can grow much more rapidly and expand much more rapidly than bulrush does. The bulrush beds in Forest Lake are pretty well established. We know where they are. They are not expanding. Flowering rush, on the other hand, if nothing is done, will expand rapidly and could populate probably several hundred acres. So we're trying to kind of keep it contained as well. So after the second treatment in September, we came back in October. We did find a few small patches. These green circles are very light growth. The yellow circles are a little bit more moderate growth. And the red circles are about something over 500 square feet. But we're talking a lot of times small little patches, and we're tracking every single patch and marking it. So at the end, although there's a number of dots there, it was only 0.3 acres total of flowering rush with no flowers at the end of the growing season. And 0.3 acres, that's about a third of a football field. Go from the goal line up to 30 yards, that's roughly a third of an acre. So flowering rush is scattered, but still relatively low coverage. Over the years, the Watershed District, in conjunction with the Lake Association as well, we started with about seven acres in 2014. Fairly aggressive. Since then, since 2017, 2018, we've been down at the end of the year of less than a total acre. Now that can represent 50, 60 patches of flowering rush, but they're small. They're 10, 20, 30 stems. We're trying to eliminate these massive beds that could be widespread and cause navigation, recreational, and ecological problems. Well, we had in 15 and 16, 2015, 2016, we had zebra mussels and milfoil come in. Zebra mussels were first observed in 2015 at a few spots. When we found them here and over there, that means that they were fairly widespread and that an eradication of zebra mussels was not feasible. So after that, we were into a kind of a management mode or a watching mode. And yes, zebra mussels have expanded now through the lake over the last few years. Here's up to 2020. In 2021, 22, and even this year, you'll find most of the zebra mussels now attached to aquatic plants. There just aren't that many hard surfaces for zebra mussels to really become abundant. But if there's a dock and rocks and boulders, they'll attach to those too. But what happens is that zebra mussels often will run their course. By that I mean in a nice lake like Forest Lake, they get abundant, they filter out all the edible algae, or really knock it down to the point that they're going to start starving themselves. So right now, in fact, this last survey for curlyleaf did find zebra mussels in some plants, also found some gaped zebra mussels, which mean their shells are open, they're not alive, so they're already starting to die back in some areas of the lake, probably due to a lack of food, because they've filtered out enough algae that there's not enough food to go around. It's pretty typical. So what you'll see too is that now most often zebra mussels are attached to plant stems. Well, with all these things going on, and top of that, a drought condition, lower lake levels, zebra mussels kind of clearing up the water column, improving sunlight conditions, we've had some significant native aquatic plant growth. The milfoil is not nearly the problem as some of our native plants, including native milfoil, northern milfoil, and also coontail, and water celery in the nearshore areas. In 2013, before significant zebra mussel impacts, here is the distribution of plants. Yellow is moderate growth. Green squares here were light growth of native plants, and red was more abundant. You can see by 2018, a few more red circles, indicating a little bit more native plant coverage. We're going to do another one of these comprehensive quantitative surveys this summer, and we'll see where we are. Last year was a bad year, or was a good year, I guess, if you're an aquatic plant for growth. It was pretty thick. Those are mostly native plants. In the nearshore area especially, low lake levels really allowed sunlight penetration, clear water. Those factors combined to produce some pretty significant native plant growth. Here's a nearshore area in 2-3 feet of water. This is all water stargrass here, a native plant. And you did see some patches like this as well, primarily in the nearshore area. All this plant growth here, kind of this plant here bending over, that's all native northern water milfoil. Eurasian milfoil can grow like that, but in Forest Lake, it supports a very robust community of northern water milfoil. Well, with all this going on then, you know, there's always a web of interactions occurring in a lake. Nutrients coming in, sunlight, algae, zebra mussels, aquatic plants, fish, all these things combine to produce kind of the conditions in the lake that we see in terms of clarity, and then with that, aquatic plant growth. The 2022 low lake levels certainly did kick into gear the native plant growth. Fish seem to be doing okay. I would predict, it's hard to quantify, but I would suspect pounds of fish per acre have remained about the same, but the distribution of fish in Forest Lake probably has changed to a degree. And that's kind of what we see as some of the water quality changes, the impacts from invasive species like zebra mussels. As that goes on, that's kind of what we see in other lakes as well. Well, the last slide here is just a quick summary, kind of reinforcing what Jerry has said too, that Forest Lake is a great lake. You know, the shoreline areas, the nearshore areas, shallow areas, bulrush beds, wildlife, waterfowl, all that is really enhancing as for these natural features. Now, we have invasive species, but the lake is also healthy. And if we manage some of the invasive species, we still have full recreational benefits to a large degree. And then the ongoing challenge is still, we manage aquatic invasive species with some cost-effective approaches. At the same time, we should be able to sustain and maintain good fishing, swimming, boating, recreational, and navigational aspects. And the ecology will take care of itself in terms of maintaining and sustaining some of this water quality benefits. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Mike. Here we go. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Jerry, always make that hard when I follow Steve here. So, my name is Mike Kitty. I'm the district administrator for the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District. And let's see if we get this. Okay, so who we are. Special purpose of local government, tasked with maintaining and improving your local water quality. So we were established by state statute in 1955. Well, the concept of watershed districts, the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District is not that old, more like almost 23 years old. For myself, I'll just give a little introduction. So my undergrad is in geology, my master's in water resources management, and I've been doing professional water resource type of work for almost 35 years now. So we're going to cover water quality improvement projects, water monitoring. We're not really going to talk about regulation, permitting, education, behavior change, but those are some of the main things that we do, and then you see all the lakes that are involved. So think of us from a special unit of government standpoint. I always say think of us like a school district. The geographic area is not defined by any artificial city or county boundary, but by the boundary of the natural element of just the watershed itself. So, and of course, the entire state has different, you know, a variety of watersheds or watersheds, and all of us, this area here flows down to the Sunrise River and then into the St. Croix River. Much of the other areas of the state either go north into Canada, Lake Superior, or down into the Mississippi. So, as mentioned, so here's the current water quality grade, so to speak, for Forest Lake, the three basins. These three basins are certainly a interesting and complex scenario for someone in my line of work, just because of the flow dynamics. So we have a little bit of higher ground, a lot of groundwater fed areas in that east basin, third lake, and so the overall flow volume of water, there's a tendency to move from east to west. However, with the wind, we also get a lot of water pushing from the west back to east, so we see this mixing that occurs, and it'll come into discussion here later on. But so they're kind of almost like three separate basins, or three separate lakes rather, but obviously interconnected. So we do go through the process of trying to measure each of them separately and continue to study and learn more about how the interaction of the three. So one of the main things that I want to cover here a little bit is phosphorus again, as we talked about, but I mean there's also sediment, which is an issue as well as other things like nitrogen and some other nutrients that could impact the lake that we're still trying to understand. So with the phosphorus, I think many of you would know that that's coming from naturally occurring elements, but also a lot of artificial sources, and particularly human activity, whether brought in from other areas. Like one of the main things that we've been working on recently was like the street sweeper. Maybe, I don't know how many of you have seen the street sweeper that the city has going around. Okay, so it's very colorful and stuff, so that was a partnership. We did the analysis and then so the city has been doing some enhanced work. I've been involved with some research for the University of Minnesota for about 10 years now, and what we have learned is that even during the dry periods of the summer, we can still remove a very large volume of material off the roadways, and which otherwise the city public works team would have to go out and remove from sumps and ditches, stormwater ponds, and so there's also an additional benefit of extending the life of the roadways. So it kind of gets to be something of what I would probably call like a net sum zero type of project. So the money being expended is being saved elsewhere, but it has the additional benefit of really removing a lot of nutrients that otherwise would flow into the lake. Because all those pipes that go into the lake, those are not naturally occurring. If we didn't have those, all that nutrient would not go into the lake otherwise. So how are we doing? So I've been with the district a little bit over 9 years, and so we've had some really amazing accomplishments, kind of some things that even I didn't think was possible 20 years ago. But we've been trying a different approach. A little bit of my background was my dad was a dairy farmer and a banker, so I thought I was going to be a banker too, so I took a lot of business classes. And we run everything through then a cost-benefit analysis approach, a strong emphasis with the board on that element as well. So we're really focusing on a small number of projects that get us a lot of return on investment. So we've been doing quite a few projects, and we'll see if I can point to these. So we've done, these are all different ones. In the Shields Lake Stormwater one, so Shields Lake on the south side of Second Lake, that was a major contributor of nutrients into Forest Lake in past years. but we did a project with the golf course there. There was a lot of nutrients coming from across the road from the agricultural fields, so we were able to mitigate that. And then once the external load going into Shields Lake was addressed, we performed an alum treatment on Shields Lake a few years ago and took it from one of the worst water bodies in the East Metro to now to the state standard. So there's a lot of reduction there. I mentioned the enhanced street sweeping, again, going from a spring sweep and a fall sweep to some areas where the city is sweeping it either 7 to 12 times a year, in addition to all the additional leaf collection in the fall time, or in the fall. So we have another one, this wetland restoration on the south side of Third Lake will be constructed next winter, or at least that's the current schedule for that. So, and now this last one we're going to get into is this alum treatment on Forest Lake. So that, the ones I described mostly are the external loading, so everything that comes into the lake, and through both the natural occurring drainage areas, but then also a lot of the artificial ones. There are roughly 50 different conveyances into Forest Lake itself. Many of them we installed as humans, so they're not there, they were not there naturally. And of course, just the one outlet. So our challenge, so to speak, was initially to look at all those different conveyances into the lake and prioritize which ones were contributing the largest and which ones the largest load, and then which ones would be the most likely situations where we could go in and make some kind of improvement. So, and once we've arrived at that, with that reduction goal of almost 1,500 pounds, the last big thing that we knew from lake monitoring, both at the surface and then deeper down, both in the sediment and then the water column, has been now to do this alum treatment. So that's what I referred to as in-lake. So when the lake gets to a certain condition, and some of us have probably, or most of us maybe have had this experience in the lake where, or a lake somewhere, where you can feel this real temperature difference from the, you know, the water at a certain level and then deeper. So when the water in certain conditions where it goes anoxic, meaning no oxygen in the lower level, then phosphorus is released from the sediment, and it feeds all that algae, and that's when you get a big bloom of algae in the lake. So that's the internal load that we're trying to address with the alum treatment. So this will be a major reduction, over 500 pounds, and it'll definitely, for the lake as a whole, it'll provide cleaner water, or clearer as well, fewer algae blooms. And along with that, we know that'll be an increased property value because there's a lot of data associated with that as well. What is alum? So it's a non-toxic compound. I mean, you probably have seen it or heard of it. Many of you probably have it in your kitchen cabinets. And so it'll be applied with a vessel, something like this shown over here, and it'll be fairly instantaneous, I will say. It has a really strong bonding component. If you think of, if maybe your high school or college chemistry courses, the alum will connect very strongly with the phosphorus, create a flock. It'll be almost like a little bit of a like whitish in color. You can see a little bit, and then settle to the bottom of the lake. But what it's doing is binding, it's capturing that phosphorus and transporting it to the bottom, and then covering up that phosphorus there as well. And then it's no longer available for algae growth. And largely, so this is a different depiction of it, it'll remain viable as long as it's not covered by, as soon as it gets to be about 6 to 8 centimeters of additional sediment or nutrients, because there will still be nutrients naturally occurring that are going to come into the lake. So now it'll be a matter of how much do we, both collectively through the storm drains and off of individual properties, lawns and stuff, you know, how long will it take before, and the recreation. The other one is, I'll note, is just the boating, you know, the power boating and things like that, that's stirring up a lot of sediment, will also cover this alum over time, and then we'd have to look at, you know, the potential for doing an additional treatment. But along the way, what we can also do is work toward more restoration along shorelines, reducing loading there, but also continue working with the city and looking at other potential smaller projects to reduce that external load coming into the lake. So kind of a combination. The alum treatment, timing-wise, we're looking at about mid-September. It'll be during the day, during the week, and there'll be no restriction. All we're asking is that everybody give that barge that's out there, give it some space to do its work. It'll be run on a GPS, be fairly automated. Think of like a smart farming technology where they almost have it like auto steer. It'll go up and down. It'll regulate based off its speed given to certain volume, so it'll be a very accurate application. And we're going to perform the launch, or the activity will be coming out of Third Lake there, out of Hagberg, boat launch. Only for logistics, the DNR there was just not enough room on Second Lake, even though it was physically closer. So that's where we're going to be locating at. So you'll be definitely seeing more signs. We'll be communicating a lot with the Lake Association to get as we get closer to that date. So we are only intending to perform treatment on the middle basin, again, based off of the monitoring to date. So, and we're very confident about this treatment, but we will still continue to monitor it. Actually, just this morning, I was in communication with another faculty member from Iowa State that was interested in doing some pre-treatment analysis. She and some students will be coming up this summer to do some additional work on our behalf to look at it in a pre-treatment condition, and then coming back later so we can continue to learn more about these interactions, especially given as I mentioned, the complex nature of the way Forest Lake is in terms of the three basins. So, as I mentioned, you know, it'll be pretty obvious. I mean, you'll see a really rapid change in the water clarity when this treatment occurs. So this is an example from Moody Lake, but I've seen the same treatment on other lakes as well around the metro, and it was even able to be right on the barge once, and I was really surprised at how quickly that conversion, that capturing of the phosphorus with the alum, the binding and the creation of the flock and the clearing of the water occurred. So the lake will have less algae blooms. It'll be clear, but it'll have more plants. So, and Forest Lake, and I know Steve, you talked about it, you're gonna be doing again our big assessment this summer again. It does have a very diverse population of native plants already, along with a couple of these invasive species and that makes for a really healthy lake, that diversity. That's a really strong indicator of a really good, healthy lake, and of course the fisheries is another one. We would expect to see the plant growth area in areas that are less than 15 feet deep. So, and you're probably already familiar with what that looks like for most of you. So, again, kind of a big project for us, and you can come to our website and learn more about it, and of course, contact myself or some of the other staff. All right, there we go.
Thanks, Mike. I got to do a little computer change here.
USB, we should be ready to go.
This one's on.
Okay. Hi, how y'all doing? I'm gonna move forward here because that is blinding. So, first, I want everybody to either stand up if you can, or at least raise your hands. Move a little bit. I'm doing that because when I was in college, we weren't allowed to do that, and I fell asleep a lot. Okay? And if you can't hear me, let me know. I'm an Italian kid, so I usually don't even use these, but for tonight I can. We all start by introducing ourselves. I'm not going to do that yet. First, I'm going to applaud each and every one of you for being here, because in my opinion, I'll take my DNR hat off. I got glasses on my head. That looks terrible. Hang on. Take my DNR hat off for a second and just be public citizen like you. Your involvement in this organization and the things that you do for your organization and for Forest Lake should be applauded at every chance that you can. Folks that get interested in natural resource issues and act upon it are, in my opinion, more important than a guy like me who happens to work for the DNR, okay? We do a lot of work, no doubt about it, but folks like you can do a lot of work too, and just your presence here shows you care. And if we don't have people like you who care, I'm out of a job, our natural resources are in terrible shape, we don't want that. You're showing you don't want that by being here, and I applaud you for that, so thanks for coming. My name is Rob Robosco. I'm the project coordinator for the Minnesota Loon Restoration Project. I'm just going to talk about the project a little bit tonight with you. Now my timer went off anyway. I prattle and I talk on and on, so I usually have a timer, but it didn't want to work because it was on battery save because I forgot my cord on the way down. It's been a heck of a day. I let the gentleman know right away that we had 2 boats break down and 1 leak, so that's why I was late, and I apologize for that. Let me tell you a little bit about the program. The first part of this is a lot about what is a loon. Now, if there's one of you that doesn't know what a loon is or some of the basic characteristics, I'd be very surprised, right? Everybody knows Minnesota state bird, right? The common loon, okay? This is a whole lot of basic stuff about it. This presentation is really tailored to our lake associations like you, but it can be a very long presentation. So there's parts of it that I'm going to assume you may know already, all right? You know what a loon is. So I'm going to kind of go through those because I don't want to waste your time on that. We all love loons. One of the things that I think all of us know and remember even back to our youth is the call of the loon, right? It's haunting, it's beautiful, right? It's attention-getting. There are 3 different calls that the loons have that are really cool. Oh, you know what? I'm going to see if this will work, because if this works, this is great. You can read, so I'm not going to read these to you, but that's great. That's the one that gets me, right? You've all heard it. I know a lot of people that can do that. I can't, right? You'd think the guy they put at the wheel of the truck could do it. I don't stand a chance. Now this one you may not have heard. This is really neat because probably in about a month, we're gonna have juveniles, okay? And you hear a lot of this when the juveniles are in the water. And some folks have never heard this. That's it. It's the cutest thing in the world if you see him do it. Oh, now it just wants to go. Now we're gonna have too much calling. If Rob knew how to work the device, then we would have just done this in the first place. I think what it wants me to do is cycle through them. And then we'll advance. There we go. Okay, so here's a little bit more facts about loons. We get to puff up our chest a little bit in Minnesota because we have the highest population of breeding pairs in the lower 48, beaten only by Alaska. You know, this is our little representation of basic ecosystems in Minnesota. The highest concentration of loons are kind of in the center of the state and sort of bleeding to the northeast. We know that they migrate. We know where they migrate, and that's going to come in to be very important for why I'm even in this, why this program was even started, and why I'm talking to you. You know, we've got about 12,000 adults, as I said, highest in the continental U.S. There's about 250,000 across their breeding population, and honestly, this real purpose of this slide is just to show you this, because everybody loves that. I've got it on my wall in my office. So, this is important. What are the habitat requirements of loons? Now, Forest Lake has loons, correct? I know they do. I've been told. I have to tell you, I've never been on Forest Lake. I apologize, okay? Yeah, I got a boo. I got a boo. That is awesome. I have not yet got a boo. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so what's important to loons are these things. And again, when I present, I don't read them to you. You can read. But the idea here is what's really important is clear water, having the correct forage fish to eat, and habitat. Habitat. Agencies like DNR and other conservation agencies across the country, when they were first being formed and they were first starting to do habitat or starting to do population work, they did a lot of things like raising ducks and raising pheasants and throwing them out in the wild. We'll give you something to shoot, basically, was the thought at the time. We learned our lesson for the most part, although we still put turkeys out there for a long time. And we learned that habitat, it's all about habitat. If you make it, they will come, that kind of thing. So here's the question. Why do we have this program? Are we concerned about loons? The strong, definitive answer is we don't know. We're not entirely sure. The populations appear to be stable, but we do have concerns. Here's different ways that loons, sort of our concern for loons is highlighted. As a state, we put them in what's called a species of greatest conservation need. That's in our wildlife action plan. That is across several divisions of our agency, and those of us in the know call them SIGINs. It doesn't work when you do the acronym, but nonetheless, it's a hard one to make any noise sound right, so we go with SIGINs. Other agencies also have a concern at the very least about loons. As you can see, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has them a bird of management concern. That's going to come into play because they're a partner on this program. So what are the primary threats? You probably know some of them, right? Again, habitat. Loons generally will have their nesting habitat onshore. So when we get situations like this, there's simply nowhere to create a nest for a loon there. Poor water quality. We just had two gentlemen talk to you about water quality on Forest Lake and treatments and different things you can do to increase water quality. You know, we never want to see this. This clearly needs some alum, right? You're the expert, so I'm going to, that's right. Lead and mercury ingestion. We were going to have a Get the Lead Out person from MPCA talk to you with me. She assumed I wasn't going to make it. That's my fault. I'll talk to Kelly. That's her name. And then human disturbance. How many times have you seen situations like this? I have. We have Gull Lake in the Brainerd area, and it looks like this for a large portion of the open water season. And different disasters and disease outbreaks. You're probably familiar with this pathogen that struck a couple times now in Minnesota. We got hit the worst, basically, in the entire country. And then the other problem with this idea of disasters is how this program even came to be, and we're going to transition into talking about that. I'm going to skip this. Why do we care? Like I said, you're here because you already care, which is great. And this is how this project got started. You may be familiar with what happened April 20th, 2010, when this oil rig exploded. The pictures and video were shocking. I mean, the pure amount of crude that was going into the Gulf was just a disaster. So the Deepwater Horizon Natural Resource Trustees was formed, and they put billions of dollars from a settlement into different habitats and projects for different critters. Loons are one of them, because we know here in Minnesota, and this is why we applied for a grant through this program from this settlement, that all of our loons go to the Gulf of Mexico for the winter, right? So 8.1 billion, 70 million for restoration of birds. That's, there was also restoration of different fish species and whatnot, but we're talking about loons tonight. So in 2019, the Open Ocean Trustees Implementation Group, that's a mouthful, I call them OOTIG. Again, I'm not great at acronyms. Went toward the restoration of common loons in Minnesota. About 7.5 million went to two things that this program works on: reducing mortality, increasing reproductive success. We were granted about 5 million. The focus for our program is the acquisition of easements or lakeshore habitat for loon nesting, and then doing what I'm doing now. I'm assuming I'm engaging you. I'm at least talking at you, so I see some smiles, so something's working. But this is huge for me. Like, again, I'm not blowing smoke. I think this sort of engagement is extremely important. When we started this program in 2019, I shouldn't say we, I wasn't there. We had, when they started, the idea was that one of the major objectives of the program was to talk to folks like you and try to recruit you as volunteers to, at the very least, care about loons, okay? We now have over 100 individuals from lake associations across an 8-county area that I'm working with directly. We've written almost 100 loon-friendly lake management plans, and we're moving into over 25 different lakeshore parcels that we have evaluated, that were brought to us at least partially by some of these lake association people, that are either, a portion of those is going to go either into what's called a conservation easement, where the landowner retains ownership of the shoreline, but agrees to certain things such as not developing portions of that shoreline. That's called a conservation easement. So it would be left there for loon habitat. That's the biggest objective in what we can realize on the ground, as well as my favorite objective, engaging folks with lake associations. And then our partners at MPCA have a Get the Let Out program, which, by the way, just now has 2 permanent employees. That program started before this program in 2010, and they kind of bumped along when they could, and they would have interns or they'd have people that were on temporary assignments. They have 2 permanent employees now, which is huge. So, kind of reiterating what we're trying to do here, we're trying to reduce mortality and increase reproductive success. Our primary strategy is protecting lakeshore habitat. That's the work area. You're thinking, wait a minute, Rob, where's Washington County? You're not in the work area. But I don't care that you're not in the work area. What I care about is talking to people that care about natural resources and are interested in helping and are interested in loons. So right away when I joined the program, I said, I'm going to stick to this, but I'm also going to go outside of it, okay? Because you have loons. And as far as I'm concerned, if we could do anything for loon conservation across the entire state, I will do so. But that's the work area. That's where I'm supposed to stay. Oh, I'm sorry. These are the reasons why it was chosen, basically to focus here, and it actually had to do with watersheds. It had to do with the Mississippi Headwaters watershed, and it was kind of one of those deals where we only have so much money and time, so let's get the biggest bang for our buck. That's fine. Really what it comes down to is, of the 4 major objectives, lakeshore protection, talking to lake associations, working with MPCA on Get the Let Out, and conducting loon productivity surveys. Of those 4, the only one that I absolutely have to stick into this 8-county area is the loon surveys. They're on a predetermined set of lakes, actually loon territories, but it's easier to talk about lakes, that we, with our federal partners at USGS, that's the Geological Survey, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, that's from the Department of Interior, we all got together and we found a big batch of what we already knew were low productivity lakes for loon chick production. And this is where science is fun. The cutoff number was 0.5. No loons have half of a loon chick, okay? We all know that. But it's science, and it gave us that number, and we picked those lakes and those territories, and they happen to all fall right in here. So that's the only place where we stick to the map. Otherwise, I don't care about that. I will work with anybody across the state who wants to work on loons. This is just summarizing what I've already told you, that there are 4 main objectives of the program. This one makes me laugh a little bit. This was a lake association I talked to, Pleasant Lake up by Hackensack, Minnesota. Beautiful area, great folks. And when I put this presentation together the first time and my supervisor saw that picture, they're like, well, you can barely see the people. It's a table and some coolers. And it's like, I'm not Ansel Adams, and I don't take pictures. I'm a biologist. So that's the best I could do for the time being. This is just kind of delving in deeper on the 4 objectives. So the big point for loons in lakeshore is nesting. I already made that point, but you also have to, earring, we have an issue here. I will read it to you now, rearing, and that is taking care of their young, as well as migration staging. You know, one of the interesting things about loons is they have this coevolution with cisco. Are we familiar with cisco? Do we know what a tulibi is? Cisco, tulibi, yeah, we got some hands. It's a fatty whitefish that inhabits some of our clear, cold water lakes, okay? And although we have loons in lakes like Forest Lake, for migration staging in the fall, they like those deep, cold lakes that have cisco. Because here's what's cool. Cisco don't spawn in the spring, right? Most of our fish spawn in the spring. Cisco spawn in the fall, and they spawn in shallow water because the water cools down. Cisco are kind of like, think of them like a trout. They really need cold water, okay? All right, so they go up against the shore in shallow waters to spawn, and the loons have figured this out, you know, I don't know, 50,000 years ago or something, and they go into the shallows and they gorge on these ciscos so that they can fly to the Gulf. Because here's what's amazing. Some of our migratory birds, even some of our waterfowl and big birds like loons, they can make that trip in less than 48 hours. Totally amazing. I remember reading a report one time on teal. Do we know what blue-wing and green-wing teal are? It's a duck. And those birds can do it in under 24 hours, and they lose 25% of their entire body mass doing it. It's absolutely stunning. So just like those ducks, these loons will gorge on cisco and then take off, and there's usually one stop they make on the Great Lakes, and then they go down to the Gulf of Mexico. So this is just a review of where we are on the different objectives. We've looked at, that's actually 25, and we've got parcels moving through that we're going to try to acquire. Are you all familiar with wildlife management areas? I got one hand, great, a few hands, okay. Wildlife management area is public land that you own that we manage for your public use for recreation. Now the next question is, are you familiar with an aquatic management area? A lot of people aren't. If there's not one on Forest Lake, is there? Okay. So they're the fisheries version of a wildlife management area. Okay. Clearly they're not out in the woods, although some of them have upland, but they're usually on the shore and they're most definitely on our lakes. So these will become AMAs. So you're familiar with an artificial nesting platform. These are used when these certain conditions are met, fluctuating water levels. Why that? Well, because you can flood a loon nest out, right? Like all that snow we had this year. if there's reoccurring predation. Believe it or not, these little doohickeys sticking up on this artificial nesting platform, that is just enough to convince our bald eagle friends not to attack this nest. You're laughing because you know that they do attack our nests. But that was shown to us by some researchers to at least provide some sort of deflection of, actually what it does is it throws off their sight. So what we're doing is we're putting out artificial nesting platforms on a subset of those 55 lakes and loon territories because we're trying to see if we can affect loon productivity on those lakes. I told you already they're only having half a chick on those lakes, and that's terrible because it doesn't make any sense. Bottom line, those lakes are not producing. Those territories are not producing. So these artificial nesting platforms are a way to bolster that. So we're doing a study with our partners at USGS and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We have 2 years of pre-treatment data, and this spring, these artificial nesting platforms went out to the tune of 45 of them in 45 different territories. Here's where I'm extremely lazy. I had folks like you build them. I wasn't going to be able to build 45 AMPs and put them out. It was really a fun project. They're almost all out there. I won't single out the gentleman who hasn't put his out yet, but I just talked to him today, so there's one left to go, all right? And we're going to look at the same sort of things we looked at for the last 2 years. Are they being used? Are the loon pairs having chicks? Are the chicks surviving to August, and are they fledging and migrating? It'll give us an idea of whether we can have an effect on those loon populations. Yep, there you go. They'll be deployed for 3 years. And then this final part here is what I'm doing now, talking to you folks, right? And we have this idea of this loon registry. And really what it is it's if a lake association like yours agrees to just doing certain volunteer efforts, you're in the registry. I tried to have like a patch made or a pin or a button or something, but apparently we're low budget on this thing, and they said, well, just tell them they're in the registry. It'll make them feel better. But I think it's really important as a way to sort of focus what those loon conservation activities are. The biggest part of that is just forming a relationship with our program. We wrote up loon-friendly lake management plan templates. We found somebody in your lake association. We dig in the absolute wealth of data that my agency has, write up the template, we personalize it to Forest Lake, and then we have that representative from your lake. And here's where I had a lot of fun. I was a kid that loved to read comic books, and you're thinking, where's that going? In the comic books, the characters were always alliterative. Peter Parker, right? Bill Bailey, right? Sue Storm, always alliterative. So the folks that have come forward and wanted to work with us on this program, I named them the Loon Liaisons. I thought it was pretty clever. They love it. So once they agree to do that, and we write that plan with them, within the plan there's actually management activities they can do. And they match the objectives that I've been talking about. One of those is to either start to take part in or continue to take part in the Loon Watcher Survey program. Are we familiar with the Loon Watcher Survey program? I'm not used to holding a microphone. My left shoulder hurts. So the Loon Watcher Survey program, go on the website, not to be confused with the Minnesota Loon Monitoring Program. They're separate, but similar. The Loon Watcher Survey is now 40 years old. It's amazing. 4 decades of people like you going out on the lakes, counting loons, paying attention to where they're setting up their territories, where are their nests, are they having chicks, drawing out maps, sending in the data forms to us. It's fantastic. We have lakes that go back that full 40 years. So part of the registry here is the Loon Friendly Management Plan written with me, and then agreeing to take part in the Loon Watcher Survey. Now, you have a Loon Watcher. I know it. And the folks that I was talking to get me to come here and talk to you wanted to know who it was. I'm not allowed by state rule to give out people's names and identification. So if you're the Loon Watcher and you're here tonight, please talk to your association. They want to talk to you. You're not in trouble at all. They just want to talk to you, right, so they can coordinate. That's all part of being in the registry. And then within those plans, like I said, there's management activities. One of those is also, besides the Loon Watcher program taking part, one of those is also working to reduce the use of lead tackle, okay? And this is where Kelly would have come in and talked. Again, that's my fault. The Get the Lead Out program is fantastic because they've looked at increasing the use of lead-free tackle. I'm a huge angler. Even 5, 7, 10 years ago, your alternatives for lead tackle were terrible. If any of you are anglers, you know that. The jigs were never good. They were never the right size. They cost 5 times what a normal jig was. It was terrible. Everything has changed. I ask you to go on to the MPCA Get the Lead Out website and take a look because they have a database on there of high quality, less cost than it used to be, lead-free tackle. That's my pitch for them because I'm guilty of not getting them to stay here. Like I said, that's actually that's almost 100 now, and that's about 80-something plans. And then the final piece are those productivity studies that we're running around like crazy. Not as an excuse, but the reason that I was late was that, I think I said this already, we had 2 boat motors break down and a boat leak. So we are running around like crazy. Those folks at the USGS that are helping us on those surveys will be often texting me in the last week or so at 9 o'clock at night, finally done for the day, and I'm thinking, wow, that's dedication, right? That's what we're looking at. That's predation, obviously. We're looking at all these factors and trying to determine if we can have any positive effect on loon productivity in light of these factors. That's our program. Oh, that's the Get the Lead Out program. I told you already to go to the website. This is where we're at right now. I'm going to leave this up here. That's who I am. I have a loon specialist right now. I had 2. I will have 2 again. We're in flux right now. We had the one gal leave for a different position. We're hiring right now, and then we're going to also hire in place of Spencer soon too. These are folks also that you can look up at DNR. They're non-game biologists that know a lot about loons, worked on loons far before I did. I've been working for natural resources for about 30 years now, 28 years, and I've only been working on this loon program for a couple of years. But these folks have been hard at it for a while. I'll leave that up there. You can see the email information. That's basically what I've got. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Rob. Wow. Thanks, Rob. That was really interesting. I think that was something that most of us didn't know anything about, a lot of this information. Could we have the lights up? Let's turn all the lights up. Wow. So hopefully you've learned some things tonight. Hopefully you are able to take something away from here that you didn't know, and I think right now we've got a little time for some questions and answers, and for any of our speakers, any 4 of us. So if anybody has any questions, raise your hands, and we'll try to answer them. Yes?
I believe this is correct, but rotting weeds on the shoreline create phosphate?
Yeah, the question is, does rotting weeds on the shoreline create phosphorus? Yeah. Why don't you guys come on up on the stage here?
Could you repeat the question, please?
The question was, do rotting weeds on the shoreline create phosphorus?
Sure, any vegetation will include some amount of phosphorus, but each species will vary in some minuscule degree. But it's certain other practices of, so there's what we refer to as the natural loading, natural background, and then what is above that. So if you think about, right, that, you know, trees are going to drop leaves in the fall, vegetation will grow and decay along the shoreline. Those are natural processes. We would have a natural background amount that we would expect. All lakes go through a process. After the glacial period, they're roughly 12,000 years old. But if you've driven around, if you know what you're looking at, there are lakes that have gone through the aging process where they're largely filled in, and they're maybe have smaller openings to the kind of the bogs and such, depending on their sequence. But you know, that's the natural fate. There's only one lake in the world that does not fit into that category, and that's Lake Baikal, because it's getting bigger.
So the question is, what's the most ecological way to get rid of your weeds on the shoreline?
Yeah, composting, if you were to, and so that's something that we would be interested. We can work with the Washington Conservation District. They've been selling compost bins. Yes, if you can just pull them up, so because right, a lot of the weight is the water initially. Mm-hmm.
Part of my question is that many people I see raking up weeds, I rake up all the weeds that come on my shoreline. I think that's and most of you do, I see. But some people don't. I guess my concern is I would like to see how that could be improved.
Mm-hmm.
Most people rake up the weeds, and I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it makes crops acreage.
Mm-hmm.
Big crop.
Yeah.
But my concern is though that some people have said, let the lake be the lake. And I don't like that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we all have, witnessed some of that. It is a natural phenomenon, as far as weeds coming into shoreline and decaying or whatever. And I think, as Mike alluded to, there is some natural decomposition that does happen with that. I can't tell you how, what percentage of phosphorus is, available because of rotting weeds, but it's an individual thing, as far as homeowners are concerned, as far as what they do with their shorelines.
But you do make a good point. I mean, not all the plants that are making their way to the shoreline, they're there because they've been, the props are hit them and other things. That's not the lake to be the lake. That's because, again, there's human activity that is impacting the lake and the water quality, including what's happening to the plants. So then you're seeing that vegetation. So, I mean, there is a need for that, and I guess it's not a conversation we haven't had before, Jerry, right? So.
No, it's a conversation we've had for years. So, I mean, it is, Forest Lake is, as we all know, is a very, very diverse native population of vegetation, and there is a lot of growth out there, and we all see it, and we all have it coming into our shores, and it's something that's not going to go away. It's a matter of how you manage it, how you deal with it. I mean, I get calls all summer long from individuals that are, either pro or con relative to the native vegetation, coming into shorelines, and it is what Forest Lake is. Yeah.
Are there services? I mean, can people hire somebody to come in and do that work?
There are some services that will come in and clean up, vegetation on the shoreline. I know that there was some high school kids that were doing it for a number of years, and through the high school here and stuff. So it's a question we get every summer. We, as an association, we've considered trying to. Well, we have pointed some people to these other organizations to help them clean up the vegetation on the shorelines. So, other questions? Yes.
Wouldn't we be better off to have some sort of control for the lake level?
Well, there is a natural, I mean, there is an elevation.
There is, but that's, once it runs out, it's gone. There's no control over it.
I'm not sure I understand the question. You're saying we don't let any water leave the lake?
No, I'm saying control it. Put some sort of a adjustable dam where the fixed level is.
So that you can, okay, so the weir there, which is right off of North Shore Trail, is at a set elevation that has been set by
By the
for-
DNR
by the
back in
DNR
the
for-
30s.
For many, many years.
Yeah.
So once the lake gets to that level, no more water runs out of the lake. Right.
By that time, the lake level is so low, you can hardly get your boat off the lifts or things like that.
I don't know the elevation of that weir there, but actually, like last year, as an example, I think the water level was quite a ways below that weir by the end of the summer, right? Through evaporation, it was a drought year last year. We all fought that issue on the lake with the lake level. You know, an adjustable weir probably is not something that would ever be approved by the DNR, because this has been a structure that has been there for many, many years, and that elevation is set by the DNR. Mike knows a little more about it because the watershed district actually replaced that weir there a couple years ago.
Right, the fish barrier portion, but, so from conversations in the past with the DNR about that, because they're the ones that set the elevation, there's just a lot of liability with doing any adjustment, because in a scenario where you would have artificially raised the water level and then experience a large rain event, of which we have now almost annually between Minnesota and Wisconsin, something exceeding 10 inches, then if it was already above that level prior to that event, and then you got a large water, think about the drainage area for Forest Lake, and it comes in, and then you're flooding properties, okay, who's gonna get that finger pointed at them? So that's the general summation of the conversation with the DNR. So it can occur again, but there are, some of the issues is the continued lateral recession, erosion of the shoreline. So, and we know this to have been, documented. So that's a whole nother thing that we've been working or communicating with and trying to launch more of a restoration program on that to hold that shoreline in place, because obviously the docks are getting longer in part because the shoreline is receding because of the wave action and other things.
I mean, we all know Forest Lake fluctuates significantly, and we've seen that. It depends on the weather. Look at where the water level is this spring, compared to where it was last fall, So I think this year is going to be a more positive year as far as lake levels are concerned, because we went into spring with a very high lake level, which we haven't seen for several years for sure. So, other questions? Yes. Absolutely, we'd be happy to do that. We'll put it out on Facebook, and we'll send out an email with the contact information. Absolutely. Yeah, good question. Yes, way in the back.
Any research or looking into salt pollution or PFAS on the lake?
So the question is, any research into PFAT on the lake?
Salt as well.
Salt, you're right, it's chlorides. Yes, we've been starting to monitor both, we have been previously in the summer, and in the last couple of years we've also been doing winter monitoring to include chloride levels to keep track of it. City of Forest Lake was a fairly early adopter in reducing use of salt, understanding it's the strong connectivity, and the reality that once the salt is in the water body, there's no way to remove it. So that'll continue to occur. I think the Public Works for Forest Lake is very committed to that. The next challenge will be the homeowner and businesses that, we as a watershed organization are also trying to work with the legislature to change a law that presently places a lot of liability on a business owner to keep anything salt-free, or ice-free. So part of it is like, what's a reasonable amount of salt or sand or something else that can be used, and then not place such a large amount of liability financially on a business owner. Some of it then gets into design. So I know from looking at other research areas, so things like porous parking lots, like the Keys parking lot is all pavers and it's porous. So anytime you get a little warming in the wintertime, that water will not refreeze into a sheet of ice. It'll go down into that porous pavers, and it'll be ice-free. So those are some of the things then that we would want to look toward and try to encourage from a design standpoint more around the urbanized and commercial areas.
Okay. Folks, it's going on 8:05. We said we'd wrap up by 8. Maybe one more question and then we'll adjourn, but I also want to mention something else to you. When you leave again tonight, if you need yard signs, they're available out there. Also, we have some merchandise for sale. We've got these really, really great Forest Lake Association t-shirts, which we're selling. We're also selling flags out there and other things, so stop by the tables on your way out if you would, please. So, one more question and we'll try to wrap up. Yes?
Any thoughts on utilizing the fuel dam research on the deeper, heavier boats and all the detrimental effect of the waves?
The question is, any thoughts on wake boats and the effects on the lake? There's a lot of studies going on with that through the University of Minnesota. Yeah, there's quite a study that's been done by that. And I know there are wake boats on Forest Lake. We all see them out there. I'm not an expert on that, to be honest with you. My personal experience is that I've seen the wake boats out there, but they're usually been in deeper water, which I think is not as detrimental as shallower water, but I don't know that for a fact. I don't know if anybody here has got any comment on that, but we as a Lake Association haven't really done anything specifically with that. Okay? All right. Well, folks, listen, appreciate your attention, your attendance here tonight. Hopefully it was enjoyable and we didn't put you to sleep. And thanks again for being members of the Lake Association. And if you got any questions, email us, go out to our Facebook page or whatever else. Thank you.